Today on Seahawks Forever, powered by BetUS, we're going to take a look ahead to this matchup on Sunday with the Seahawks traveling to MetLife Stadium to take on the Jets. Blair Yusko of Bubbs on Sports on YouTube covers the Jets. Really knowledgeable guy. He's going to help us get to know this New York Jets team. That's coming up next on this episode of Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Head over to BetUS, see the current money lines and prop bets for the Seahawks-Jets matchup. And if you sign up for a new account today, they'll give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your second and third deposits, up to $2,000. That's at BetUS using the promo code YouTube150. Also, guys, you're going to want to try the new Chairman Pro electric foil shaver, the latest innovation from Manscaped, used and trusted by over 11 million men. This is the best electric foil shaver I've ever had the pleasure of using. If you want a smooth shave or you want to leave a little bit of stubble, it has interchangeable heads. It's also wireless and waterproof, so you can use it in the shower. And right now, if you want to buy yourself a Christmas gift or suggest it to a loved one or buy this gift for someone else, they'll give you 20% off plus free shipping over at manscaped.com using the promo code Seahawks. All right, Blair's going to join us today. And I really love discovering new content creators in this field, especially younger ones. And I wish I was young today, because rather than take the route that I did, share a little something personal with you here. Rather than go back and as much as I absolutely adored my time at Washington State University, I am a Coug through and through, but went and got my broadcast journalism degree and then did traditional sportscasting for many years. And then, later on in life, when podcasting became a thing, jumped into this genre. But I'm kind of jealous of these young guys that get to do this and start out this way and start to build their brand and their online presence from the get-go. And he's doing a tremendous job, and he knows this Jets team inside and out. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you would. It's the best way to support the channel, but every other way that's available for you to support me and the channel is listed down below in the description. So hit that up for sure. Let's get into this. This is Blair from Bubbs on Sports and I talking Jets Seahawks. So Blair, thanks for taking the time to join me with your New York Jets getting ready to host the Seahawks at MetLife Stadium this Sunday, a place the Seahawks have had some success in a couple of different ways. Took it to the Giants last year, and of course that's where they won their Super Bowl. So some good memories back there for the Seahawks. They're going to be facing a Jets team that right now is just really, really hard to figure out. We're going to dive into some of the stats and some of the matchup aspects. But first of all, just give me sort of your zoomed out view of everything going on with the New York Jets right now. Cleaning house, Robert Saleh out, Joe Douglas now out, reports that Aaron Rodgers is on thin ice. What's your take right now overall on what's happening there with the New York Jets?
Yeah, well, first of all, really appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to diving into this matchup with you. But yeah, you're kind of spot on. You set me up perfectly there. Yeah, Joe Douglas obviously fired last week during the bye week. The Jets are one of the only teams in the NFL that can find a way to be the lead story during their bye week for all the wrong reasons. But here we were last week during our bye week, finding a way to make headlines. You, of course, had the Bombshell Athletic article that came out about the whole Rodgers situation, not wanting to play in 2025, but not for the Jets. Then he was on McAfee yesterday saying that he hasn't told anybody in his inner circle that he wants to play in 2025, still deciding kind of how he took it year by year in Green Bay. Feels like that's going to be the same thing coming up this offseason, where it's going to be once the season ends, reevaluate. Who knows, maybe another darkness retreat, we'll see, and then figure it out from there. It's a train wreck, to put it simply. I mean, it's been a disaster. I tell people all the time, last year when we acquired Rodgers, there was so much excitement, and I was in the building the night he tore his Achilles, and the minute he went down, it was awful, right? You could hear a pin drop in that stadium. You finished out last season, and all that excitement that we had last year was like double going into this season. And here we are at 3-8. If you would have told me the Jets would be 3-8 going into this game, I would have thought one of Garrett Wilson maybe got hurt. Maybe a guy like Quentin Williams or somebody like that got hurt. Aaron Rodgers got hurt, but all these guys have been healthy. It just hasn't connected. The coaching is a serious problem. They fired Sal after the Minnesota loss. The owner has been awful. The meddling has been very present, something that is very present in his past, kind of started again. The Athletic report that came out basically stated that Douglas wasn't just a dead man walking. And you could hear it in his press conference that he had during the trade deadline after they dealt Mike Williams. He basically said, I work at the pleasure of the owner. So there's not really anybody in the front office that's working. There's not a single coach on this coaching staff that's really competent. I mean, Jeff Ulbrich is so in over his head right now. And it's unfortunate because he's a guy that had a really good resume, had experience, and was a guy that was well respected, maybe could get a coaching gig, but that's obviously lost now because he's been 1-5 since picking up the intern job. So it's a team that lacks leadership. It's a team that's got a soon to be 41-year-old quarterback that looks old. He looks like a 41-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. That's the best way I could describe it. So it's been a mess on so many levels. All the way, it starts at the top with ownership. It goes all the way down to the players. You could see it in these games. They find so many different ways to lose, whether it's Greg Zuerlein 1 week missing field goals, whether it's a back-breaking penalty, whether it's Rodgers throwing an interception late. Good teams find ways to win. Bad teams find ways to lose, and unfortunately, they're just a really bad football team.
Given what you just described about the ownership situation there, how attractive of a job do you think that situation is there?
Not very attractive. I personally don't think so. Now, they did just hire Mike Tannenbaum, who formerly was the GM from 2006 to 2012, and Rick Spielman, who helped the Commanders last year, to help from the 33rd team to help kind of lead this next GM and coaching search. But I don't think it's very attractive at all because they're going to be in the whole Aaron Rodgers situation with the cap space there and post. I know they could save some post June 1st cut. I'm not sure the specifics, but if they want to bring Rodgers back, there's not going to be many coaches that want to come here and work with Rodgers in a 1-year window to maybe go 9-8 at best and then find themselves in 2026 searching for answers without Rodgers, post Rodgers. So that doesn't make it attractive. And yeah, Woody Johnson, although he might be going back over to be an ambassador with the recent presidential results, which would mean his Christopher would take over, which would happen the first time Trump was in office, could potentially factor into how Woody plays this all out, but it's not very attractive. You're going to have the whole questions about Rodgers. You're going to have the whole meddling of the owner. Christopher's not any better. He's the one that said Adam Gase is coaching to where football is going. We saw how that ended up working out. So you look at Vrabel, you look at Gruden. I know he's suing the NFL. That's kind of a complicated situation. Vrabel's got ties with Belichick. Belichick doesn't like the Jets. I could see him steering him away. You look at some of these other teams like Jacksonville, they've got Trevor Lawrence. I could see a coach. They've already got a quarterback there. He's already under contract. Like that could be a much more favorable destination. The Jets are entering another major rebuild. Ownership's not good. And that's where I think maybe a Rex Ryan or somebody like that could potentially make their return because the Jets
wants it, right?
He does. He's begging Woody Johnson. He's like, it's just about time until he goes to his house and goes on his porch and begs for him to just give him the job. I think he will get an interview. But that's where we're at. Like the Jets are in such a bad spot that it might have to take a Rex Ryan because he's the only one that actually wants this job. He's one of the only people in America that's actually proud to be a New York Jet, was proud to be a coach. I've said many times, I think they've got to go to the proven route. Vrabel's the top of my list, but I don't see that happening. I think you're looking more at maybe Brian Flores, chip on his shoulder, could potentially want to come here. You see what he's done in Miami or Minnesota. The whole Miami ending was rough, but I would like to him kind of have a chip on his shoulder against a division rival. So it's not attractive at all. And unfortunately, it starts with the ownership. And I think the quarterback has a big play in that because I don't think many coaches are going to want to come here with Rodgers, even if Woody goes overseas again.
Yeah. Just don't let Tannenbaum get his hands on any personnel moves. Isn't he the guy that suggested trading 3 first-round picks plus for Myles Garrett earlier this season?
Him and Rex. Well, after Tannenbaum left, Rex had some problems too. But I wonder how that all shakes out too. Like, if Tannenbaum reach out to Rex and say, "Hey, let's give you an interview," because they were obviously together during 2009, 2012. So it's one big happy family, is the way I like to put it.
Let's dive into these the 22 players on the field, because this this is a pretty mysterious team. I mean, when I started diving into some of the statistics and some of the traditional statistics, even some of the analytics, you would think it would equate to a better record than 3-8. Like they really don't have that many glaring weaknesses outside of, the performance of the offensive line, and some of the win rate statistics are kind of bottom of the league, which is something we've been used to seeing from the Jets, but they went out and threw a bunch of resources at the offensive line and added a lot of young pieces there, and even brought in some veterans this offseason. And even if you look at Rodgers' performance over the last 3 weeks, I think in the last 2 games, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Last 4 games, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's been very efficient, but not the surgeon we're used to seeing. We're not seeing, if you look at his spray charts the last couple of weeks in particular, less than 200 yards passing per game, completion percentage closer to 60%. He's not taking those deeper shots down the field. Has he become more of a game manager kind of in how they're running this offense there?
Yeah, you're spot on. I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going to start. Yeah, they have not taken any shots downfield. And as many Jets fans know, when Adam Gase was here, they kind of ran what many called like a 10-yard offense, where it was, a couple 1 to 2 yard screens. You had plays in the flat, these mesh routes, slants, but nothing deep. They never stretched the field vertical. And when Davante Adams got traded here, I thought that would maybe open things up for Garrett Wilson, vertical, open things up for Davante, of course, vertical. They were so great together in Green Bay, and it hasn't. I believe there was a stat I saw the other day. They've only attempted 6 passes over, I believe, 10 or 15 yards over the last 2 games. And I believe Rodgers last week only had 1 pass over 10 yards or something like that, 1 pass completed. And I remember last game against Indy, there was a stretch of 2 plays in a row where he threw 2 1-yard passes, and you look up and it's 3rd and long. So, yeah, they haven't stretched the field deep, and Rodgers' numbers, they are like good, but they're not these 4 touchdown, huge 300 yards, like you said, those games, those vintage Rodgers games that we saw where he'll go out there and complete, 70-something% of his passes and throw for, 330 yards and 4 touchdowns and dominate, and they'll win 35 to whatever. And something that they've talked about all year, this offense, every week Rodgers talked about, we got to get to 30 points. We've got to get to 30 points. They haven't hit 30 points once this season. Yeah. Last week, they win that game with 30 points. Of course, they scored 27, lost by 1 to Richardson, or 2 weeks ago, rather, Richardson and the Colts. So, yeah, it's been a lot of just short, quick passes, nothing deep. I think part of it is Rodgers isn't 100% healthy right now. He'll admit that. He said it multiple times. And if you watch the way he's throwing, he's not, like, on his lower half, he's not putting as much into it as he used to, or when he has been healthy in the past. And I think that could be some of the reason for not throwing it deep. Like, he just doesn't have enough power. I mean, if you go back to that Vikings game in London, he underthrew Mike Williams for that game-losing interception. That's a play that never happens with Aaron Rodgers. This year it's happening. So I think that's part of it. And I also think it's just part of the offensive coaching staff. Some of the play designs are just very, very questionable. They haven't attacked the middle of the field much. It's a lot of sidelines. And there was a stat that was out there a couple weeks ago. Rodgers this season has had his lowest target rate in the middle of the field since his rookie year, which is crazy. So, yeah, it's been a lot of quick throws, nothing deep, and very low explosive plays.
It's interesting, too, when you look at, Rodgers' numbers. It's certainly not prime Aaron Rodgers and what you were used to seeing him during his MVP seasons in Green Bay, but it's pretty much in line. His touchdown interception ratio, his completion percentage, his depth of target, pretty much in line with his last full season in Green Bay in 2022. And so maybe we started to see some of this decline even before the injury. And certainly also what I see on tape is a guy that just can't move anymore. And that used to really be an underrated part of Rodgers' game is he was really mobile, and he could hurt you with his feet and moving around in the pocket too. And that's something we're not seeing. He certainly doesn't have a lack of weapons, though. You mentioned the trade for Adams to bring him over and add him to Garrett Wilson. And this is something that I'm not so sure that all Seahawk fans even remember or have put together. But Garrett Wilson is a product of the Jamal Adams trade. And that, so you have the Seahawks to thank for Garrett Wilson there. And despite all how tumultuous the season's been there, like, he's putting together another good one, on pace to have over 100 catches and 8 touchdowns. Devontae Adams, 26 catches and a score since the trade, since coming over there. Is Wilson still kind of the straw that stirs that offense, though, and one that will likely be a focal point for this Seahawks secondary?
Yeah, 100%. As a matter of fact, he's had some flashes this season with Rodgers, but he hasn't, the connection hasn't quite been there like it was in Green Bay. There's been some moments, but not a ton. But Garrett's he's been arguably the most consistent player on this offense, because even Breece Hall has had some moments this year where he struggled. The yards per attempt has been down. It's gone up the last couple weeks, but recently, or overall, his whole body of work is not as good as it's been. But Garrett's been great. He's 5th in the NFL in receptions, 12th in the NFL in yards. Him and Rodgers have had a pretty solid connection. First couple weeks it was bumpy, but recently it's been much stronger. He had a span a couple weeks ago where he went 3 of his 4 games against Minnesota, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and New England during that 4-game stretch, which unfortunately were all losses. That was during the whole Devontae Adams trade, Robert Saleh thing. He had 3 of those 4 games for 100 yards. So he's been one of the only reasons this offense at times look competent. And there's a good case to be made that if he wasn't even out there, Rodgers' numbers, you mentioned obviously looking closer to 2022, wouldn't even look anywhere near 2022. They would be even more ugly. So he's been great. He's been excellent. And the only thing I worry about Garrett is he's a winner. He loves this game. He's one of those guys that just hates to lose. My biggest concern with Garrett is if they can't get this thing figured out next year or the year after, you're going to see the trade request come across eventually. But he's awesome. He's a great locker room guy. He's just even the last 2 seasons without any quarterback play, right? He had Zach Wilson in 2022. He dealt with Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle, all that last year, had 2 1,000-yard seasons. And this year's season's on his way to a career year in both receptions and yards and touchdowns for that as well. He's had 7 touchdowns his first 2 years combined. He's got 5 already this season. So he's been awesome. And without him, the offense isn't good, but it would be league worst potentially if he wasn't a part of this team. And that was one of the bright spots of the Joe Douglas era was the Garrett Wilson trade. Because outside of that, he missed on Zach. He's had some many other misses in free agency in the draft, but Garrett's he's a blue chip cornerstone piece for sure.
There was talk in that report that came out last week of Aaron Rodgers potentially not finishing out the season, either going on IR because of the accumulation of all those injuries you talk about, or just because they want to, kind of move on and take him out of the chemistry, take him out of that group. What do you think would happen if they did that? Like what's your sense of how he's looked upon by his teammates there? I know we saw it, with your other New York area team with the Giants there when they made the decision to move on from Daniel Jones. There were a lot of his teammates that were very upset by that decision, really, really revered Daniel Jones and wanted to continue on with him. Are they making the right move by sticking with Rodgers, at least for this week?
I've said this a couple times, and I know the fan base is very split on this. It's very 50-50 in this market. If it was up to me, you could make the case that Rodgers, they could have potentially sat him down, not because he wasn't playing well, but because he was hurting and was not playing up to his ability. And you could tell he was banged up, that they could have sat him, rested him earlier in the year. So then he was ready for now, and then played Tyrod Taylor because they signed him to a 2-year contract. Instead, they kept rolling with Rodgers. They completely refused to back up. Rodgers playing hurt, clear not to the best of his ability. If they would have maybe been proactive with Rodgers, he wouldn't have gotten to this point where basically everything's hurting. It started with an ankle, then it was a hamstring, then it was a knee. Now everything's hurting. So I think they could have been proactive with that. But now, look, I think Rodgers will play until they're officially mathematically eliminated. I think once they're mathematically eliminated, I think you could see a world where they put him on IR. I don't know. I don't think they'll outright just cut him. But I think they could put him on IR, kind of one of those phantom things. And especially if maybe he has a conversation with Woody, has a conversation with the front office and says, you know what, I don't want to come back. Don't throw me out there with the risk of a major injury and that affect where I go next year. Now, I do think some of Rodgers, just the way he is with his ego, I do think him playing through all these injuries and maybe him not ever going on IR at the end of this year or getting shut down is just him trying to prove that I played a full season coming off the torn Achilles, and also him trying to prove that he came back from that torn Achilles much sooner than many players do. So I think that could be some of it, but I would be on board with it. I've said it many times. I don't want Rodgers back next year. I want nothing to do with him in 2025. Ulbrich said today that as long as he's healthy, he'll play. Some of that's coaches speak. He's not going to come out here and say, once we're eliminated, Rodgers is going to sit down. He's not going to say that. So I feel like it's week to week, but I wouldn't be surprised if they lose this game. They lose next week to Miami. You're looking at a 3-10 record, mathematically eliminated, 4 games left. They shut them down for the final 4 weeks and let Tyrod, who maybe is the bridge quarterback next year, take over. And I would be on board with that. And I think it's probably a win-win, because if you do trade him in the offseason, if he's hurt, you're not going to get anything for him. So you kind of just look beyond this year, which has been so disappointing.
As I record this, tomorrow is Thanksgiving, which means Friday is Black Friday. But you don't have to wait to experience Black Friday savings, because my viewers are getting a special Black Friday deal from the folks at Doer, built for doing lifestyle apparel for every occasion. And I want to talk specifically about their stretch performance denim. These are the best jeans I have ever experienced in my life. 20% stretch. They're made out of antibacterial and sustainable materials. Quality build. And right now you can experience up to 50% savings on their Black Friday sale. Head over to shopdoer.com. That's DUER, shopdoer.com/forever for Black Friday savings from Doer, built for doing. This episode sponsored by BetterHelp. It's Thanksgiving. Who better to give thanks to than yourself? If you've ever considered trying therapy, but something's held you back, maybe it's just that you don't want to go sit in a waiting room. Maybe you're just nervous about trying something new. Now you can get therapy in the comfort of your own home, thanks to BetterHelp. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. They'll match you with a licensed therapist. You don't think it's a fit with that therapist? You can choose another at no additional cost. And right now, my viewers and listeners can experience 10% off their first month from BetterHelp. Go to betterhelp.com/forever. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forever for 10% off your first month. A few weeks ago, Breece Hall was probably circling the Seahawks on the schedule, looking ahead, because they couldn't stop anybody in the running game. They were one of the worst in the league, and it was really tough to watch here. They have tightened that up, made some personnel moves, changed out their linebacker group. The team's playing just much better assignment sound football and gap sound football. And we've seen 3 straight weeks now of them being very, very effective against the run, completely shutting down that Cardinals rushing attack, completely shutting down Christian McCaffrey and Kyron Williams before that. Breece Hall's been very good this year. Now, he hasn't had those big, huge games that we saw from him early in his career, pre-injury in particular. He's only had 1 100-yard rushing game, but still, averaging over 4 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry in his last 4. He's a 4th leading receiver on the team as well. Your assessment of his overall performance this year?
Yeah, like I said a little bit earlier on, he started the year slow. It was a little bumpy. I think part of that too was that San Fran game. They couldn't get him involved much. They were getting blown out. So they had to pass a lot. And in that Denver game, he struggled. Denver's defense was all over us. The offense wasn't doing anything. But it feels like ever since that stretch of like the first 5 games, once that Buffalo game happened, he had 113 yards in that game. He had that huge 42-yard run that you can make the case could have been a touchdown if he cut back upfield and made Taylor Rapp miss. But ever since that game, something's clicked with him. From a receiving perspective, he had 100+ receiving yards in that Pittsburgh game, and from a rushing perspective as well. Since that first kind of stretch, he's had 2 touchdowns, since that point, and the yards per attempt, like you mentioned, over 5 the last couple games, 4.9 last week, 5.2 against Arizona. The one thing I would just love about Breece is they would give him the ball more. There's been some games where he's got a rhythm going and they get away from it because they're trailing in some of these games. Yeah. So I think it's important if you can get a lead and just keep feeding him, but that would be huge. That's kind of the mantra here, is just feed Breece. He's such a beast when he's out there, and of course when he's healthy. But yeah, after a slow start, his whole body of work is impressive, and we'll walk away from this season as him being one of the, as much of we might win 4 games this year, and as bad as it's been, guys like Garrett Wilson, guys like Breece Hall, they give you hope that this thing can get turned around much faster than some of our previous rebuilds have, where they just completely fall on their face, similar to this one with the whole Solid Douglas era. Yeah. But he's been excellent. And I think what's really good about Breece too is he's kind of overcome a lot. Like last year, the coaching staff, Nathaniel Hackett publicly came out and said that he didn't know he was as good as a pass catcher as he was. He came out middle of the year last year and said, we got to get him more involved. It's like, I mean, really, like, this guy was a stud at Iowa State. We're just now realizing he's this good. And also last year, the offensive line was a concern. And this year, the offensive line's been much better, but there's still been some stretches where they've had some bumps. So, and bad quarterback play where teams stack the box. So he's had a lot against him. Team stacking the box, coaching, not knowing how to utilize him, poor offensive line play, and he still is able to go out there every week and produce at a high level. And it'll be interesting to see what his future is, just because the whole running back market now is kind of strange. But definitely somebody that if you can keep him around, you love to have him, because he's a legitimate elite 1-2 punch from a receiving and a rushing perspective. That at his full potential, when he's playing his best, we saw last year, his name was up there with the likes of Christian McCaffrey and guys like that. So, Breece is awesome.
And what the Jets have been known for the last few years, certainly their performance on defense, not as stout this year, giving up 22 points a game. That's kind of right smack in the middle of the league, right where the Seahawks are. I think they're back-to-back in the league rankings in that statistic. Some of the traditional stats look good, and they certainly have a lot of name recognition, right? We're all familiar with Quentin Williams and C.J. Mosley, Sauce Gardner, of course, here in Seattle, DJ Reed. We kind of made him his money here and let him go get that elsewhere. What's been the thing missing from this defense that has kept them from being the dominant defense really we saw last year?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up DJ Reed. He's been awesome this year. He's been arguably the best player on this defense this season. I don't think they'll bring him back, but he's going to get a very large bag elsewhere to be a number one on another team. He's been awesome, and he's been great these 3 years, on the field, off the field, all that stuff. But the biggest piece missing is this pass rush. And that's one of the biggest knocks on Joe Douglas. What he did to this defensive line is borderline criminal. I mean, he went out there this offseason. He had a defensive line that had Quentin Jefferson on it, who had a career high in sacks, despite missing the final, I believe it was 3 games of the year with a hip injury. He had Bryce Huff. He had JFM. He had all these pieces on top of Jermaine Johnson, Quentin Williams, Will McDonald in year 2. And you go into this season and Bryce Huff leaves for the Eagles. He trades JFM away for nothing. Quentin Jefferson, goes to the Browns. He then gets released. They have a chance to claim him. Buffalo claims him. And I believe in his first game, he had a sack for Buffalo. So he took the strength of this team and drove it right into the ground. Instead, what he did was acquire Javon Kinlaw, who has been awful this year. He has not provided much at all. Michael Clemens gotten a lot more playing time. I don't even know why he's still on the team. From a running quarterback perspective, he does not hold his edge. Kyler Murray scored 2 touchdowns against him because he wasn't holding his edge. Against the Colts, Richardson scored a touchdown on Clemens' side because he bit for the fake. So he's been awful, and he's still out there because they just don't have many other pieces. Like, they have Brady McGregor, UDFA. They had Leonard Taylor, UDFA. Eric Watts, UDFA. Loaded up on all these undrafted free agents. Jermaine Johnson, unfortunately, tore his Achilles in week 2. That's out of Douglas's control, but very unfortunate. And in one of their big ticket moves in the offseason, and they sold the whole fan base on it, that he was better in this win now window, was Hassan Reddick. And that was supposed to be the Bryce Huff replacement. The Jets last year lost 60% of their sack production when Quentin Jefferson, JFM, and Bryce Huff were not on the field week 1. And part of that 60% sack production coming back was Hassan Reddick, who's been one of the elite players at getting sacks, getting to the quarterback. He missed the first 7 games. He was holding out. And in that report, the Athletics report, it did say that Douglas had an offer for Bryce Huff. Woody Johnson shot it down. He wanted Reddick. Who knows how true that is? I wouldn't be surprised if it is true. But either way, like, they went and took all those guys, gave them away, traded JFM because they didn't have enough. They couldn't pay him with the whole Reddick thing. So they gave away JFM for nothing, brought in Reddick, and he missed the first 7 games, came back when the team was 2-5, and now they're 3-8. So he's done nothing. It's 100% been the pass rush. And I know you look at the sack numbers, they're up there in the league. Like, I think I don't know exactly how high they are. I think they're top 10 in sacks, somewhere around there. But 15 of their total sacks came in 2 games. Week 3 against New England. And they also had a really big game. I believe it was against the Texans, whose offensive line's been a problem all year. So arguably the two worst offensive lines in football is the two games they took advantage of. That's it. So
and yet they're second best in the league in passing yards allowed per game. Yep. That speaks to the coverage on the back end and the quality of that secondary. If you're consulting the Seahawks on this game as someone who watches this Jets team week in, week out, what's the best way for them to attack that defense? If the Seahawks are going to beat the Jets on the road this Sunday, tough place to play, tough trip back to the East Coast, what would you suggest they do?
I think really for this team it's try and get them stretch the field a little bit. The Jets in that Colts game, there was so many times where receivers got behind this defense, safeties didn't pick guys up. There was miscommunications in the secondary. I think it's really trying to stretch the field a little bit from a passing perspective, from a rushing perspective. I mean, you can run the most vanilla runs against us. We're not going to be able to stop it. We haven't stopped the run all year and we can't tackle. So, Kenneth Walker, this could be a big game for him. But from a passing perspective, JSN, DK Metcalf, you send those guys downfield, it's going to be tough. And as crazy as it's going to be tough for us, as crazy as it sounds, Sauce Gardner is a guy that I would target. He's been the Jets' worst corner this year. He has taken a massive regression from what we saw his first two seasons to where he is now. He can't tackle. He's been awful. The tackling's been terrible. Last week, there's some miscommunications between him and Jalen Mills, one of our safeties that we picked up this season on a play where Alec Pierce got, I believe it was like 30-something yards. They ended up driving down and scoring on that drive, which ultimately led them to win the game. So I don't think you can be afraid to target Sauce. I know the name's there. He's had two very good seasons, but this was a guy that, with the game on the line against the New England Patriots a couple weeks ago, got beat by Kayshon Boutte, I believe his name is. Like he spun him around and beat him, and they ended up winning that game. So DJ Reed's been great. Michael Carter, although he was hurt, he's still very good. But you put JSN, you send him deep, especially if they're playing in a zone where safety's got to pick up coverage on the back end. There's been a lot of problems with this safety room. So I think it's stretching the field a little bit and as well trying to have some success on the ground, which is something that they did do better last week. They contained Richardson for the most part, and they contained Jonathan Taylor for the most part. But the week prior, they struggled against James Conner in that Cardinals rushing attack. So I think that's your best bet there for Seattle.
Well, hopefully they can make that happen. The Seahawks haven't been shy about targeting number one corners. Early in the season, they went after Patrick Surtain. They went after Christian Gonzalez, especially with DK Metcalf. It'll be interesting to see how this passing game goes against that secondary. Blair, I really appreciate your insight, man. You're doing a great job with your channel. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, well, first of all, really appreciate you coming on or having me on. It was awesome. Love talking anything Jets, even when the team's struggling. Always have a great time. In terms of my channel, you can find me on YouTube, Bubbs on Sports. And my Twitter is @Bubbs52. I also write at the Jet Press. That can be found on my Twitter page, just in the link. So if you want to check out my articles there, writing for the Jets, obviously all Jets content on my YouTube channel. And just watching this team, trying to just talk my anger away at times. Sometimes that's all you can do. You just, some of these games, you watch them get blown out, got to just fire up the camera and fire up the mic and just let your emotions out. It's sometimes all you can do.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend.
Yep.
Thanks for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It was awesome.
Well, one thing the Seahawks shouldn't have to worry about, it's always a concern when I look at the schedule release in the spring. One of the things I look at is late season, cold weather, bad weather games. Seahawks have to travel to Chicago in a couple weeks. We'll see how that goes. But this week, weather shouldn't be an issue. The forecast at MetLife Stadium on Sunday, sunny, clear as a bell, no clouds, no precipitation. It's going to be cold with a high of just 37 degrees, but no snow or rain to deal with. We'll see if maybe that passing game can get going against that Jets team that, as Blair told us, has had some trouble getting to the quarterback. And as much as he indicated that maybe their run defense is a weakness as well, we'll see if Mike McDonald's promise that offense and that running game continues to get closer and closer, that he sees good things on tape, that he thinks they're about to come together. We'll see if that happens this week. And remember, from an optimistic standpoint, I've talked about this a little bit on Twitter and Blue Sky, that the same verbiage that he'd been using throughout the season on the defense, that even though it looked bad to us for a while, he was telling us it's coming, it's going to gel, it's going to come together. We're seeing the signs on tape. He's saying those same things about the offense right now in regards to the running game. This would be a good week for that to gel, because with the Cardinals coming up again in the next week, and the Seahawks in first place and trying to control their own destiny in this division, they can't let down in this game. These are the teams that if you have aspirations of making the playoffs, you have to kick them while they're down. You have to take advantage of a team that's reeling right now, trying to find themselves and try to get a win this week if they want to accomplish their goals and win this division moving forward. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel. All the other ways to support me in the channel are listed down below. Shout out to BetUS and all the other sponsors for supporting the program, and thank you for watching and listening. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks.